Hello everyone, you're welcome to this video, and this is the first video in our React.js tutorial series. In this tutorial series, I'll be teaching you guys how to implement or code websites using React.js. So with this tutorial, you'll be a very good front-end developer at the end of following this particular tutorial series. Today, we are going to see introduction to React. We are going to see how to install React, the different ways you can install React, and we are going to see how to understand the folder structure in React.js. We are also going to see how to create a component. So in this tutorial, you should be okay with creating your very first component in React.js. And if you're asking yourself what React.js is simply a front-end development library that runs on JavaScript, built by Facebook, and is used by multiple companies like Netflix, Airbnb, and many others. Even Facebook uses it, and there are so many applications and companies that build their products that evolves around the React ecosystem. React is not just limited to building websites. You can also build mobile applications with React Native, which is also a part of React.js. So at the end of this tutorial series, I'm going to also be creating a React Native tutorial series that will help you on how to build mobile applications from beginning to the end and even deploying them on Play Store, App Store. So let's get back to this series and see how we will be creating our React application. So the first two things you need is you need to download and install Node.js. So search for Node.js, download Node.js and install. Just make sure you have Node installed on your laptop. You can follow the link in the description of this video to actually get Node. The second one you need is after installing Node, you need to make sure that Node is globally installed and also install npm globally. And all you need to do is after downloading and installing Node.js, just go to your search bar and type cmd. When you type cmd, make sure you open cmd as administrator. So you just click on to open as administrator. And once you open an administrator, what you want to do is to run the command npm install globally. So you just run the npm install -- global and you press enter, and this will simply install the npm command globally on your laptop. Now once you're done, there are two ways of which we are going to be installing React. I will just show you with the one way, but you can use the other one. The first one is following the React library and installing using npx install create React app or npx create React app. But we are going to be using Vite simply because Vite is a lightweight development environment where we can use to kind of write and compile our React code, which is very well faster than the usual way of actually writing React. So what we are going to do is you simply go to your VS Code. You are going to need VS Code. I believe if you came across this video, you already know that as developers, you must have an IDE to which you're developing. Now, this is just like series of projects I currently work on or I've worked on. And I just want to create a folder here. So I want to create a folder here called ReactJS class. And this is the folder. So I just want to navigate to that folder and open the folder. So what I'll simply do is I'll just type code in here. I'll type code and I say ReactJS class so that it opens the folder or the folder itself in VS Code. So I can minimize this one so we can do everything in here, knowing fully where we are actually working. Now the first thing we want to do is we are going to be running commands, and the commands will simply be to kind of install. If you don't know how to do it, I will leave a link in the description for you to get to this website where you can follow throughout how to install React. First thing you want to do is you can simply come here and you copy this code npm create Vite app latest, or you can type it if that is okay for you. So what I'll simply do here is I'll come to my VS Code. I open a new terminal, and in a new terminal I simply want to be able to type the command I've just shown you guys there. All right, I go to terminal, and when I'm on terminal I want to run npm create . All right, I want to run npm create . So I want to run this command npm create vite app latest. So you want to create the latest version of it that currently exists. So once you run this, you are just going to wait for a while for it to actually load to the interface where you need to actually select what you want to create and that. So just wait for a while it's loading. I'll pause the video and I'll play back when everything is up and running. All right, so it asks me if I want to proceed. I'll say yes. Press enter. The next thing they'll ask me is the folder. I should specify the folder to which the installation should be done. So here I'll just put / to use this folder where I'm currently at, and then they'll ask me to choose what I want. You just use the arrow keys to go down to React. We are installing React. You see that there are tons of libraries that Vite support, like Vanilla, Vue, React, P-React, Lit, and the others. So even Angular, it supports Angular. So I'll simply click on enter when I select React. And we want just pure JavaScript. We don't want TypeScript or anything. So I'll select React. Then now, once I'm done selecting these dependencies, I need to run npm install. And so you can see here, you already have files that have already been added. So all we need to do is to run npm install. What npm install is that it comes to this package.json and install all the dependencies that are there for our React applications. So I'll run npm install. I press enter. This might take a while to install all the dependencies, but once the dependencies are done installing, our React application will be good and we can start running and kind of working on it. Okay, I'll just pause the video and I'll play it back when the installation is done. Alright, so our installation is done, and all we need to do is to run this other command npm run dev to actually start the development environment. So npm run dev, enter. Then now we are going to see the implementation. So it's starting our development server, and the development server is started on this. So I just click on this and it will definitely load the development server, which is running on localhost port 5173. So that's where our development server is running. So we'll just wait to see what we have. So as you can see here, we have our React application up and running. So you just have this simple interface React app that talks about Vite and this. So you can literally go through the React development website, like their documentation, to learn a bit of things about React, because I'll always recommend you to always follow documentations of various things you're working on, because documentations will actually help you to kind of target some things, especially in scenarios where it is very, very hard for you to figure out what you're working on or what you need to do. So I'll recommend this. I'll leave the link in the description. Now let's get back and explain what we have. So the first thing you want to see is to understand the folder structure. So we have different files. Package.json simply holds all the packages that have been installed here. For instance, you can see we have React and React DOM, which are installed. Next, we have the index.html. This is where the whole application rendering is done in this root div. So everything is being rendered in that particular div. We will see more about that. And the next one we have is the src. The src simply have all your React files. So all the files you're going to be working with on React will always be inside of the src folder. They cannot be outside of that folder. And in the src folder, we have the main. And this main.jsx is the file that actually targets that root HTML where we spoke about just earlier in the index file. So this is what targets it and renders content directly to it. So for instance, you can see here, it is rendering the app component. If I go here, you see the app component, and the app component is simply rendering all of what you're seeing that was showing here. That is this. So that's from the app component. So what I will simply do is I'll just try to minimize to put it on the side so we don't be opening windows. So what I'll do here is click here and I'll choose this. Then I'll open this, click here, then I'll select this. Then we have this and this. All right, so we have them, both of them. So the first thing we want to do is to be able to see how we can actually get rid of what we have now. So I'll explain everything with part by part. So I'll first of all remove everything here and I'll just return an H1 here. before that, let me just get rid of some dummy data or dummy content that is not necessary. And function. Okay. All right, I'll just clear everything out. And I'll just create a simple React functional component export. This that returns the div. If I save, you're going to see that it returns just the app here. So that's what we want. So in basic terms, we can have React rendering this way. So what is simply happening here is this. We have a component called the app component, and the app component has data, but we are rendering the app component in the main.js. So in the main.js here, this is where we are actually rendering the app component. So when you do advanced things like learning how to use React routers and stuff, you understand how to dynamically show different components if you want. But now let's take an example here. We have the app component and we want to render other components in this particular application component. So how can we do that? So we have this here, which is a div that just kind of returns that app stuff. In this div here, we could return, or we can create another application component. And for us to do that, inside our SRC, let me just create a folder called components. So we'll call it components. And this folder called component, inside, I want to create a component maybe called the button component. So we can call it button, or let's say hello.jsx. Say hello.jsx. And this particular hello.jsx will simply return hello to the user. So in hello.jsx, we want to create our React functional component export. So that's just like an abbreviation to automatically create React functional component export. And before you do that, there are some things you need to install. Like you need to install the React dependency stuff, like as an extension, so that you can always do that. So now let's say that for instance, this component simply says hello. This is a component. And I save. Now we could literally render this particular component in our app here, which means we go to the app.jsx and we render the component there. So in rendering the component, it's just like you're writing HTML, and this kind of writing is simply called JSX, which means you are writing JavaScript syntax in kind of is JavaScript notation. So I'm going to put a less than sign, and I'll call the component name, which is simply hello. And this is it here. I'll just click to make sure it imports it at the top. So when you want to use a component, you must import the component at the top, and then down here you close it like this. Like I said, I have open and close tag in HTML. If I save this, you see now it returns, it says hello, this is a component. And we could create as many components as possible, and we can kind of focus on a specific component in a specific place. Yeah, so that's mostly how we can work with React.js. All right, so let's try to do something complex, like a little bit complex. So we are going to create different sections. Like let's assume this was a website, and the website has the header, the main section, and the footer. Let's try to create different sections and see how we can actually reuse this in our program. Inside the components folder, I'm going to create header.jsx. So I'll just call this header. Oh, it starts with a capital letter. Always make sure your component starts with a capital letter. So I'll call this header.jsx. And this header.jsx also, we have another one called footer.jsx. And then now we want to have another one called section.jsx. So we call it section.jsx. Now these are the three components that we have. Now in our header.jsx, we just want to create a simple header. So I'll say, all right, so here I'm going to create React functional component export still, and okay, enter. So we have this. So this is the header. So what we want to do here is simply to kind of write basic HTML, something that is not too complex. So what I'll simply do here is in this div, I want to just return two things. The first one will be the logo, and I'll put it in an H1 format, and I'll just call this code with crest. And the next one is I want to create another div. So this one will be called .nav, or I want to create a navigation, which is nav. And in this nav here, I want to create element, which will be a tag. So I'll say a, for instance. Further, I'm going to show you why we will not be using this anchor tag and the differences between you using this and another person not using it in React when we do routing. So here, this is the home. I'm just going to duplicate this by pressing Alt, Shift, and then I press the arrow down button to duplicate them. So this one here will be about. This one here will be contacts, for instance. And this one here will be, let's just call it services. Now, once we have this, I could still add a call to action button or something, but let's just leave it the way it is. Now, the next thing I want to do is to just style this. So I want to just add some styles just to make it look good, or we could just allow it basic. So what I want to do here is I can add this style class name, and be mindful, in HTML we give class, but in React we give class name. So what I want to do here is to give it a class name. I just want to call this navigation like this. And in here we have nav. So what I want to do now is to style. I can just go directly to the app.css and I write styles for it. First thing first, I want to clear off what we have as styles, and in the body I just want to make sure I give the basic, like margin should be 0. So margin should be 0, same as padding should still be 0. The next thing I want to do is that I want to save what we have, and I want to give it a background color of, let's say, white, and I save such that we have something like this. Then I want to give the text color to be black, something like this. So we have this. So we have our basic stuff. The next thing I want to do is we have another file here called index.css. What I want to actually do is just to remove this index.css from here, such that we don't have any other default styles except the one we have from this. So the component goes up. Now all our styles are in the style.css. So the first thing I want to do here is simple. I want to render the component that we've just created, which is the header component. So I'll go to the app file, which is the app.js. That is where we are trying to render what we have. So here I will render the header. So we are rendering the header, and we just click here to import the header component, then we close it and we save. You are now going to see that this is the header component that we have just created. So it is here. So once we are styling, we are going to be seeing the effect as it occurs here. So the first thing we want to do is that we want to come to the dot navigation, and in our navigation we want to give it a width of 100%. You want to give it height of about 60 pixels, or let's just give it 100 pixels, and we want to say display should be flex. We want to align the items to the center, and we want to justify content to be spaced evenly, or space between, sorry, something like this. If I save, I think I missed the name. Let me go back to header, which is this. In the header navigation, let me save this, and then now I think I'm missing the class name, so I'll just copy this. I go to the CSS and I'll replace it with this one we have here, just to make sure we are targeting the same element. So if I refresh this, why is it not changing? Okay, navigation, header. All right, I understand why it is not changing. It is because we are not giving a width. So we have to define the width for the main element, which I actually removed that style already by dislocating. So hashtag root, which is our root directories, we want to give it a width of 100%. Let's save, and I think that should solve the problem. Alright, so the reason is because we have not actually imported our styles. So here I'll just import, and I'll just call the name, which is what? App, capital A. So app.css, and I save. I think it runs, but it specifies this. All right, so what was actually was just to import this app.css /app.css. So you can see now the styles are actually working. And I come back here where I have this red. Let me just get rid of it in here. So I get rid of this line, no red color, and I save. We have this. So we have code with crest. I will change that code with crest, which is in the header, to just like this, CWD, and I save. So we have this. The next thing I want to do is simply to come back to our CSS, which is this, and I'll call the dot navigation the anchor tags, which is this. And what I want to do here is simply to give the margin of 12 pixels, and I want to change the color. Text decoration, they should not be underlined, so text decoration should be known, and we can give them color to be maybe black, and we can say font weight maybe should be bold, so we say font weight should be bolder, and we save. We have something like this. Text decoration should be known. Text decoration should be known, no underline. We can also increase the font size, so we can say font stroke size, and we say 24 pixels, and we have something like this. You could still reduce it to 20, something like this. You can add hover, stuff. So what we want to do now is in our footer, which is this footer section here, we could just create a footer. So here I'll just create a React functional component export, and I press enter. This is the footer. We simply want to return footer there, and then we can maybe position it at the bottom, so, or anything, or we just add it there. So this is just an example here. If I wanted to add it, I'll go to the app.jsx here, which is where we are rendering the different components. I'll just add the footer, something like this, enter and space / this, save. Then we have footer. I think it is still refreshing. I go to the footer component, I need to save it, which is this, Control S, so the footer appears here. So we happen to have styled and do things, so you see that in your application you can actually build interfaces by creating sub components which can actually be reusable, which means you can reuse your component. For instance, if I go to our app.jsx and I want to reuse a specific component here, for instance, I still want to call the header somewhere, I could just call the particular component like this, and it appears as the number of times you want to actually call it. Like you could create components and you reuse them. So in multiple applications, you are going to see where there are many components that people actually create, and they can reuse the same component in multiple places. All they need to do is to create one UI, then they write logic to actually implement or do what they want. Now let's do a recap of what we have seen so far. So far we have seen how to install React, and we said before you install React, you need to have Node.js installed on your laptop. So you go to the website link in the description, download Node.js, install Node.js, run the command npm install global --global to install npm globally. Then go to the Vite website, which is also linked in the description of this video. Visit Vite and create your React application using the tutorial or using the flow that you find there. Next, after you do this, I want you now to kind of walk through this tutorial again and try to create your own component. Create as many components that you can and call the component here. And without further ado, you can watch out this other video here to actually see more advanced features after this. How can you create routing? How can you go advanced? How can you do other things with this? So this is actually a tutorial series, so feel free to check out if there are more videos in this tutorial, and catch you guys on the next one.